What are you innovating this time when it comes to 10x?
Having 100 warmed up accounts to which they're posting 3 videos a day every single day.
Dude.
And they're pumping out 300 pieces of warm content per day, each generating minimum 500 views. Therefore, you're generating minimum 150,000 views. So when we first did this podcast almost a year ago, I think UMax was at a little bit over 5 million ARR, and Cali had just hit 100K in MRR. So UMax is still at over 3 million in ARR. RizGPT, I think about 1.5. Cali, on the other hand, is doing over 2.5 million a month.
And the game has changed a lot in the last year too.
The game has changed so much. I think that this is something that people really don't understand. I think that there has never been a more high leverage time to become technical in human history. For years, I failed at building. Now, I think I'm in a stage where I'm not just trying to make a full-time income. I'm trying to build a legacy. Reject what I say. Reject what other people say. Learn foundational knowledge, build your skills, and follow your gut.
We're back.
We are back.
Back 1 year later.
1 year.
Where
It's
it
been
all
a crazy
started.
year.
Crazy year. Generational run.
It's been fun. It's a
Dude.
great life.
Last time we sat across from each other on a podcast, it was the first time you ever did a podcast. Your first little introduction into content. It's still the most viral episode we've ever done on the channel since then. And I think it's one of the first podcasts that was kind of made in this like last sweep of like AI consumer apps and like the hype cycle that's been on our rampage for the last year. But this is going to be a good episode. We'll get to talk about like everything that's gone down in the last year.
I'm excited.
So I guess we can go chronologically. But I think like before we even go there, like what are the highlights of the last year?
Yeah, so when we first did this podcast almost a year ago, I think UMax was at a little bit over 5 million ARR, RizGPT just over 2 million, and Cali had just hit 100K in MRR.
It was like a side project that you like slightly mentioned. We glossed over it.
Side project, working with an incredible team.
Shout out
and,
Zach.
you know, see how far that's come. So UMax is still at over 3 million in ARR. RizGPT, I think about 1.5. So those have both dipped but have not put much time towards them. Cali, on the other hand, is doing over 2.5 million a month, which is over 30 million annualized revenue. Shout out to the Cali team. Awesome team, awesome company, great product. And yeah, I think it's probably worth me giving a brief background to everybody listening on what my past year has looked like.
100%.
So last time we recorded was in the summer. And as I mentioned, had these projects doing well. And I put a good amount of time into scaling Cali up in the early days and then shifted my focus into Apex. Apex was this all-in-one self-improvement ecosystem where we were doing free apps, and the long-term play was content and CPG, so supplements and whatnot. Had 2 co-founders out here. Shout out to Apex Jesse and Apex Kling. But as it started to progress, I had this gnawing feeling. I was like, man, we are in the AI revolution, the greatest technological revolution that has ever occurred. And I was like, man, I've got to be building AI technology. I think that everybody that's a builder right now, unless you have a true calling to something else, AI is the place to be. There's still so much to be built. And so worked on Apex, and then I was like, I got to go back to building AI software, which led me to begin building 10x. 10x is the project that I'm currently working on. The long-term vision of 10x is to revolutionize and redefine what personalized education looks like.
And we have a lot to talk about when it comes to education today, when it comes to like the new alternative career paths that are kind of emerging, and even like college and how that's changed so much in the last 2 or 3 years, especially since 2021 We have a few interesting stories to cover there.
Yeah. I think it's worth providing a little bit of context on how 10x got started. I recently spent 36 days locked in an apartment in New York as part of PMF or Die, a challenge to hit 1 million in ARR in less than 90 days. Now, I left after 36 days. I did not hit 1 million in ARR.
Did you die?
I did not die.
Okay, that's good. Just making sure.
But yeah, it was a cool practice in, seeing how quickly you can build a product when you move extremely fast. Now that said, the sort of mental toll that it took on me of not being able to leave an apartment, as well as being on live stream 24/7.
We had a few close calls too of our phone calls almost making it to the live stream.
Yeah. I don't think it's a conducive way to build a business, to be honest. Literally locking yourself in an apartment and being on live stream. And I think that it impacted my ability to think clearly. But now, back in San Diego.
Yeah, I feel like of all the people I know, you of all people should not be locked in an apartment.
No, I don't think that it was good for me. So we built this product that was, so I say we, it was originally me and Patty, my co-founder. Now we ended up parting ways. I think that he's going to go on to do great things,
100%.
but it wasn't the right fit. And so I built this product. It was like a Duolingo style learn anything. I think that to build the future of personalized education takes more than the 2 weeks that I spent developing it, and launched it with about 2 or 3 days of marketing efforts, hit 10K in MRR, but I was like, the RPM to CPM just didn't make sense. I knew how long it would take me to scale it to 1 million ARR. I knew how much capital it would take as well. And so I decided to put it on pause and return to kind of the ideation on the UX side of things, the ideation phase.
And the game has changed a lot in the last year too.
The game has changed so much. I think that this is something that people really don't understand.
And we're going to talk about it. First, we're going to break down the whole thing.
Yep. Where do you want to take us with that?
The thing I came into this trip even thinking about, because we're here in San Diego, right? And we've kind of spent the entire day up until this point talking about or reflecting on so much of the last year. And you have some of the most I think some of the most interesting conversations we've had just to start things off is around purely education and looking at the people around us and how so many of them have gotten such high levels of success from the most interesting career paths. I think it's worth starting off by talking about what was it that what are the similarities that you're seeing across people like Zach or across some of the other people we talked about today, and how you're thinking about that success as you're building out 10x.
I think that there's a common misconception that it's not worth learning technical skills nowadays because AI is just going to do all of the coding for us. I think that is completely ridiculous. I think that there has never been a more high leverage time to become technical in human history. And now, while becoming technical, I don't think that it will take the same form that it took 10 years ago in terms of scanning Stack Overflow to solve, to debug your code and to make your code work. So I think that now you use AI in order to code and in order to build. And one of the commonalities that I've seen among successful founders is their ability to apply AI within everything that they do. And there's the common position, which is as technology progresses, we abstract away the sort of hard work, right? We don't have to write in machine code anymore. We have interpreted languages. We have you can write in Python as opposed to having to write in machine code. Now you can write largely in human language, but you still need to build that sort of underlying technical engineering knowledge. Now coming back to what I said, you apply it to everything. And so, for example, I was hiring a designer for 10x, and I put up a listing on Upwork. And I was like, here is a trial challenge. So I had 5 to 10 different designers all spend about 2 hours of work redesigning a page and designing some icons and whatnot. And this one designer produced significantly more high quality work than all of the others. And I asked him, I said, how are you able to do this? Because he did custom icon designs and all of these different, built out the sort of design system and whatnot at a higher quality and higher quantity of output. And he said, well, I used AI to design the icons for me. He knew the correct AI tools to produce clean mobile app icons. And I think that we're seeing this across the board. The best content creators, Sam Zia, who's visiting right now. Shout out, Sam. Sam uses ChatGPT all the time to help him with hooks and with scripts and whatnot. And engineers obviously use it to write code. Designers use it to design their icon libraries. And I think that right now, if you're not at the cutting edge, a high proportion of people don't really understand how to apply these tools within the context of their daily work and their daily life. And I think that this is a massive market inefficiency that needs to be solved. And I think that it will be solved moving forward.
And if, when we've talked about building consumer apps, and a lot of people talk about building products in general, there's this thing I was talking about earlier today, which is you don't try to reinvent the entire wheel, right? You don't try to reinvent it across, at every step of the way. So if you're building an app, it's still homepage, interaction page, profile page. The onboarding flow looks relatively the same, but there's something that you innovate on each time. For you, Max, it was the visual hook distribution strategy. What are you innovating this time when it comes to 10X?
Sure. So in terms of 10X, I have a number of different theses for how I want to reimagine the product. I think something that I'm really leaning into in this kind of version 2.0 is truly customized and personalized content that can automatically update as you progress and learn about new things. And so to me, what this looks like is capturing a lot of user information during onboarding and having a long onboarding flow where we get customized information from the user about what it is that they're looking to learn, and then we generate an assessment during the onboarding to assess their knowledge within different topics to then auto-populate this feed for them. Now, I think what you had mentioned about UMax and the other apps that I've built, RizGPT, Cali,
especially Cali, yeah.
We did a great job innovating on a couple of key features that were previously unsolved.
What was it for Cali?
For Cali was the ability to take a picture of your food and have the calories automatically logged for you. Now, I think this may be a hot take, but something that I really believe. I think that there will have been more 7-figure, so $1 million plus annual revenue apps, mobile apps specifically, that were built in 2024 than will be built in 2025 based upon one or two key AI functions.
Because the technology was still catching up. GPT Vision meant that you could take old apps that were previously built and innovate on them with AI.
And a lot of the innovation has been done.
People are catching up.
Now, that said, I think that the rate at which new technology becomes possible grows exponentially at a greater rate than the new technology currently exists.
Certainly.
Or has been built. And so now you might say, well, according to that logic, there will be more 1 or 2 function apps built in 2025 that achieve $1 million in ARR than in 2024. To which I would say there may be more apps as a whole, but not these super simple 1 or 2 function apps. And I think that from what I'm seeing, builders across the board, there is too much copy and pasting occurring of people copycatting or failing to innovate in any real sense on previously popular or currently popular user experiences. I think that with the increase in capabilities of these new AI tools means that we can now chain together different prompts and different sort of user actions to create more fully AI native experiences, which is what we're trying to do and what I intend to do with 10X. I think that people need to stop over-indexing on building one key feature that's going to be really viral, because most of the really viral one key feature apps have been built. You need to figure out how to build amazing products to be able to continue to succeed in the increasingly competitive AI app market.
One thing you mentioned that was really interesting is like chaining together the right tools and the right prompts to be able to build really full products and interesting things that actually make people's lives better. I want to talk about what some of those tools are. Once you have this app built out, how are you thinking about marketing it compared to how you thought about marketing UMax and Cali in the early days?
So with 10x, so I want to speak a little bit more generally here for anybody listening, because the individual strategies that I apply to 10x may not necessarily be transferable. So I want to assess the overall environment as a whole. Almost 2 years ago, I made a tweet saying that UGC would become increasingly in high demand at a relatively exponential rate due to the fact that AI enables developers and new programmers to build more and more products. Therefore, more indie hackers or small teams building applications with greater demand for UGC as well as influencers. I think that anybody that's active in the tech community is well aware of this now, well aware of the fact that everybody's doing UGC. Now, I think that it's becoming saturated. I think that there is relatively very little alpha left in it.
You don't believe in the whole AI generate 1,000 pieces of content and rip them and pick the best ones and run Facebook ads?
So I do.
Okay.
Though I think that the alpha has diminished. I think that one of the greatest bottlenecks, and from what I've seen, one of the greatest bottlenecks moving forward is, I was speaking more broadly to UGC as a whole. Now, as AI UGC improves, it becomes increasingly viable to produce viral pieces of AI UGC content. But if you can produce those 10,000 pieces of content that each have a small probability of going viral, the question then becomes, how do you get them posted on warmed up accounts? My point here being, I think that one of the great opportunities in the viral content domain as a whole will be not in creating UGC content, talking to the camera, whatever. I think that it will be in people that are able to spin up systems of having 100 warmed up accounts to which they're posting 3 videos a day, every single day.
Dude.
And they're pumping out 300 pieces of warm content per day, each generating minimum 500 views. Therefore, you're generating minimum, 15,000 views? No, 150,000 views.
50? Whatever, okay.
Oh, yeah, 300 times, yeah. No, that's 150,000.
Okay, yeah.
300 videos multiplied by 500 views per video, 150,000 views baseline if it's warmed up per day. And now this isn't accounting for videos that actually do well. And some proportion of those will do millions of views. So this is something that I'm thinking about very deeply within 10x.
And it's so interesting because we're seeing, obviously, I invested in Founders Arm. And so what's cool about that is I get access to all of their clients and seeing how everyone's like, all the ones who haven't made us sign NDAs, the ones who are open with it, I get to see at a high level what they're using VAs for because it's part of the onboarding calls. All of the companies that are doing well right now have shifted from like hiring virtual assistants for like customer service primarily to now hiring virtual assistants to build out essentially like automated systems that could be replaced by AI, but in the moment they're using real people and they're using 10 of them instead of using 1 or 2, specifically in a way that optimizes for output instead of quality. And it's because in that sheer optimization of output, you kind of brute force your way to figuring out what works purely from a numbers perspective.
Exactly. I mean, we're all well aware that the more shots that you take, the higher probability 100%. That you have that one goes in. And I think that probably the greatest example of this to date is Temu. Anybody who's familiar with the Temu strategy, Temu essentially had an affiliate system where they had like millions of pieces of content going out through per day. I think that what we're seeing on social media as a whole is the saturation of the quote-unquote building a personal brand, building AI apps, starting a personal brand on short-form social media, doing UGC as a whole. These are all hot topics because I think that they all exists on top of the social media algorithms, in that social media algorithms operate as a power law. If a video goes viral, there's just this outsized amount of profit that can be earned, whether you are building your own personal brand, you're doing UGC for a company, or you own the company, be it AI application or a D2C brand that makes profit on those viral videos. Now, I think that people need to get more creative, like we'd spoken about, taking more shots, having 100 warmed up accounts, 1,000 warmed up accounts where you're posting AI UGC every single day. With regards to building an AI product, I think that it's chaining together multiple different sort of prompts as well as steps in the user experience beyond just the user input and immediate wow AI output. And so, yeah, I think that as AI technology continues to improve exponentially, the level of complexity necessary to succeed within the space will continue to increase, as will the size of the outcomes.
And at that point, at which point there becomes even more alpha in being close to the ground and knowing what tools and resources pop up and emerge before anyone else. Arena.
100%. Arena. Just like I had said earlier, there has never been a more high leverage time to either be or become technical, which I think it's worth touching on what we're doing with Arena.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's crazy how fast things move, right? Because we had our first conversation about this. I posted that tweet 2 weeks ago, where we hosted a Twitter space, and I guess for audience context, I got to a point where from the more conversations I was having, I started to realize that the way to help founders the most, as Aleph / as like a person in the space, was by connecting them with people they could hire, or by connecting them with people they could reach out to and learn from. And so at which point we're talking a lot about AI and like the understanding of how to build tools is a huge moat. I also see talent as being a huge moat, and the person who has the most access to the most cracked or intelligent or smart, connected builders, founders, etc., to be that person or to be one of those people will create a ton of opportunity for you to create whatever impact you want to see in the world. And so the MVP of like testing out if this was a thing, if people wanted to be part of something like this, was we jumped on a Twitter space and 4,000 people tuned in, and we just basically just kicked it for an hour and caught up on life on like an hour-long Twitter space. And what that turned into was hundreds of applications of some of the most interesting people that have been following me that I've never chatted with before, kind of like reaching out, taking the time to put an application in, people with millions of followers or who have, generated tens of millions of dollars in annualized revenue and ARR, kind of like reaching out to be part of this thing, because everyone is starting to understand that who matters, as much as what I would argue.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, it's like, if we accept the thesis that you need less capital than ever before to be able to build, and at the same time that AI tools are becoming increasingly powerful, in that you need less capital to be able to build something and you can build it faster, then the question really becomes, what are the tools that you use and in what direction do you build? And I think that this was one of the theses behind Apex, to be honest, in the more general self-improvement domain. Now, the issue there was that, as I had said, it's like I want to do things that are purely technological focused, and yet I still believe in the value of building community and building the hub for people to be able to learn and work with one another. And I think Arena presents this amazing opportunity to show people like what are the best resources, what is the best AI IDE to use, what are the best image generation models, what are the best new ways to create content using Sora and mixing that in with different captioning tools and whatever it may be.
So at which point it makes sense to share that like the V0 of Arena, kind of like pun intended there, is quite literally it is a group chat of the most interesting people. It started off as like the most interesting people I came across on Twitter and on YouTube from doing podcasts like this. And now it's evolving into that plus just generally people in our network who also have something to share slash want to have, slash have built their own kind of like niche micro internet kind of like communities. And we want to just bring all of them together. There's no paywall, there's no gate, there's no, MLM scheme behind it. It's just an application form where if you get in, where if you apply and it sounds like you have something to share with the community and there's something that we have like, that people, or you have something to share or something that you've learned, like you'll get in as simply as that.
Yeah.
There's a link somewhere. Right over his face.
Link right here. I think that one of the really interesting components about Arena is what we're seeing becoming increasingly common nowadays is this sort of alternative career path. I think that for a while, there was a lot of discourse about whether or not college was worth it. And, you can still make the argument for the average individual whether or not it makes sense to go to college. Now, that said, for the exceptionally high-performing individual, I think it's pretty clear that the best way to learn is not in a traditional academic environment. And I think one of the clearest examples here is my co-founder from Cali, Zach Yadagari. Zach is the CEO of Cali.
17-year-old CEO.
Now 18, but originally 17-year-old CEO. One of the most intelligent, mature, hardworking people I have met in my entire life.
If he told me he was 27, I would believe it.
I would believe it instantly. You hop on a call with him and you're like, oh, he's got to be like 32 or something. No, he's
so he's got a wife and kids, yeah, 100%.
Absolutely incredible. Everybody that speaks to him recognizes it immediately. And yet, Zach, who has a 4.0 GPA, 34 unweighted, 34 ACT,
$30 million ARR business.
$30 million ARR business, president of his robotics club.
No way.
Got rejected from almost every single school that he applied to.
He applied to like 20 schools too.
He got into UT Austin, U Miami, and Georgia Tech, which are good schools, but they're not Ivy. They're not top 10 schools by any means. And I think to me, it's just ridiculous.
Because he was so interested in going to school too. A lot of kids that made a tenth of the amount of money that he's made at his age, they'll kind of go on Twitter and they're bashing college, like I didn't need college, look at me. And I think what's interesting is even in this conversation, you graduated. I think you had a great time in college. I dropped out after a year and a half, and I think going to college was still an amazing decision. I don't regret a day of it. I also think I got out at the right time. And you said something interesting earlier, which was that for the average individual, college might make sense. For the high-performing individual, there are better ways to learn. I think I agree with the premise in most cases, but I wouldn't go as far as saying that like college is good if you're average, and if you aren't average or if you're above average, then you don't need college. I think what we grew up being told was that you go to college if you want to get a job that pays you really well so that you're financially successful, so that you can buy a house and have kids and have a wife or a husband or whatever. And that is how you set yourself up for life. And we've just seen too many exceptions to where, yes, it takes a level of privilege to kind of have access to the Wi-Fi and the internet and, to have the time to be able to like learn those skills, but it's free. Like anyone can go learn on YouTube how to do anything. And that has been proven by the thousands of kids that are on the internet today talking about how, forget like however you define success, whether it's money, whether it's fame, whether it's, peace and fulfillment. People who have any or all of those can attribute a ton of their success to, I got my start by learning things on the internet. And I do think there's a case to be made around college. Some people want the experience. Some people want to, be in a walking distance from people their age who are all trying to figure out life together. Some people want to have fun. Some people just want to get out of their parents' house. And I do think that some people want to complete their degree because their mom and dad want them to, and for them that's enough. And I think all of those are valid reasons if it's a valid reason to you. What I think I strongly disagree with is the notion that the binary, if you want to be successful and have prestige and have made it in life, you need to go to an Ivy school and graduate at the top of your class. Because that's just so not true.
Yeah. I would say that I generally agree with most of your points. More than anything, I think that anybody who is intelligent and hardworking can relate to the fact that being in school it simply will not advance your level of knowledge as quickly as if you
Self-learned.
self-learn.
Self-learned about something you actually cared about.
Yes. And I think that is the primary backbone of both 10x and Arena, which is that in this era in which, I keep saying it, but I'm going to say it again and again and again, where we have increasingly powerful AI tools you have PhD level knowledge accessible at your fingertips. The only question is, in what direction do you pursue the acquisition of knowledge, and then how do you apply it? And I think that this will continue to be arguably the greatest unsolved problem. And I think that everyone listening to this podcast is taking a step in the right direction of consuming relatively high quality information.
Especially if you made it to this point.
Especially if you're all the way this deep into the podcast listening to us
yap.
Yeah, fucking. Now, I mean, you mentioned how, most successful people that we know got their start on the internet. 100% true. 100%. That said, think about how many times you got scammed and duped, and you just consumed fundamentally the wrong information.
I spent a lot of money on courses early on, and I don't regret it, but I definitely didn't have to.
Dude, I spent so much time working on different things that were just a complete waste of time.
Oh,
now,
100%.
I think that there are
so much money on Facebook ads.
I think that there are pretty much two fundamental pursuits of learning that every individual should follow. I think that one is obviously AI tools, becoming more proficient with them.
Like whatever industry you're in,
whatever industry you're interested in, whatever you're in already.
Whether it's medicine, legal, engineering.
Any creative idea that you have, just like immediately find the applicable AI tools and then start creating with it. And then second, and I think that this is an underemphasized component of knowledge acquisition and skill acquisition, which is that you should still learn time-tested foundational knowledge. I think the two most important domains of skills and knowledge that any individual should pursue today in 2025, and I think will continue to be the case for the next 5+ years, will be becoming proficient with AI tools, becoming extremely skilled with chatbots, image generation tools, and whatever your industry-specific tools are. And then second, continue to build your foundational knowledge. Continue to study calculus and statistics and psychology and philosophy and things that are going to enable you to navigate and understand the world. I don't think that simply being good with AI tools is going to get you all the way long-term in your career. I think that the fundamental principles of the universe and of human knowledge as a whole, like you still need to know, and more important than ever, you need to know what the right questions to ask are. You need to know, you need to have a fully developed worldview in order to build anything substantial at all.
Do you think that you need to have a fully developed worldview? I feel like all you need is a burning question that you really care about, and you will develop your worldview around that in the pursuit of answering that question.
I think that it can be
it's definitely an asset or an advantage. But I don't know if I'd agree with the fact that you have to have that.
Sure. Maybe I should rephrase. It will be significantly easier to build anything of substantial value if you have a developed worldview. Now, this does not mean that you accept, all academic literature. It does not mean that you accept the conclusions within every one of these fields, every one that you find. There's a great example, Ed Thorpe, who built a device to calculate where the ball would fall on a roulette wheel. So they spin the wheel, the ball goes around, and then it lands on some number. And it was considered mathematically, physically impossible to accurately calculate this.
Right.
And yet he did it anyways.
How?
Now I think that this is a great example of somebody who extensively studied physics and mathematics and was aware of the conclusions that people had reached within the field, and yet rejected them and decided to pursue the truth on his own regardless. I think that I have some minor examples of this in my own life. People saying that you can't just learn how to build a fully functioning application with ChatGPT. People still don't believe me to this day when I say that I did it, and yet I did. And I think that this will increasingly become the case. You are going to hear people tell you what you can and cannot do with AI. People tell you what you can and cannot do.
People tell you what you can and cannot do with your life.
With everything in your life. And yet, if you, coming back to this point, I think that if you have a strong view of the world and you think from first principles, and you are equipped with the necessary tools, that you will be so far ahead of everybody else.
I think one thing that's really stuck out to me as like a reflection is who you take advice from can make or break you. And I think back to advice that someone actually gave me, which is, any career advice you get from someone whose career you do not envy, take with a grain of salt. Any fitness or health advice that you get from someone who does not have, health or fitness that you envy, take with a grain of salt.
Yeah, who are the people that are telling you that it's actually just like it's impossible for people like me and you to lose weight because our metabolism and thyroid won't allow it. It's always the fat person.
Then we just got canceled.
Who's the person that's telling you you can't just go build an app that's going to make you significant amounts of money? You can't just go, whatever it may be. It's always the person that has not done it themselves. And
like playing whatever the opposite of devil's advocate is in this case, like a lot of those people mean well. I got a lot of advice growing up from people that meant really well and wanted the best for me, that just their hearts were in the right place and they just didn't have the same context that I didn't realize I had from having basically grown up on the internet. And I think that, for everyone that you meet that is like, has dropped out of school or has taken a career path that, people around them didn't agree with growing up, a lot of those people usually had their hearts in the right place. Like there's the example you see on the TikTok, Instagram Reels all the time of my teacher told me I'm never going to do this, that, and the other, and I made their salary last week. And it's like, yeah, but how many people really had teachers that like just wanted to see them fail? But it really is important just like to think about where you're getting advice before you take it and you run with it and you start shouting it from the rooftops and you develop your entire worldview around it.
Yeah, I think that people rarely give advice hoping the worst for other individuals, and yet at the same time, we should recognize the source. I think that probably nobody I know experiences this to a greater degree than Zach. Zach is constantly being told what he should do with his career.
Even though he's 17
life.
and he's made, his company makes $30 million a year.
Yeah. I also want to give a quick shout out to the other co-founders of Cali, Henry Langmack, also still 17 years old, unbelievably smart, hardworking, technical, just absolute beast. Jake Castillo, hardest working person that I know, the greatest growth operator in the entire mobile app space that I'm aware of. Just absolute killers. So shout out to them.
Okay, I was gonna say, also on that point, I have a ton of respect for those three because I've seen so often what happens when a co-founding team gets a ton of success and one person gets a ton of the spotlight and the other one or the other two or the other three people end up very bitter and they leave the company and they start saying these things about them on the internet and they build a competing product, or they just hate from the sidelines and they still stay in the company and they keep their equity but they're just not supportive at all. I feel like those three, I mean, the four of you really, because I guess you're also a co-founder. All of you have a very interesting dynamic, and that I haven't spent much time with Henry or Jake, but I've seen a lot of bad co-founder pairs in the last year, especially as we've talked to so many companies. But the general ego kind of like internal damage that exists in a ton of companies, I never saw with you guys. And I mean, half your team's under 18 years old. So what do you think the differentiator was there?
Yeah, I think back to the early days. I'm not going to lie, like from the start of the company, I was kind of the coach,
I remember I was in the room.
Like
that is a massive. We got a bear last time. We got the biggest mosquito I've ever seen this time.
From the start, I was kind of the coach. And, I put in the majority of the capital, did UX with them, brought in my marketing strategy, influencers from my previous projects. And there was definitely a period where it started to transition to like Zach's the CEO and Zach's the one running this company.
So we talked about in the Twitter space, suddenly you're like, dude, I haven't been in this position before.
And suddenly Cali reaches a height which my previous company's apps had never reached. And I think that you know, I think that it was a very collaborative effort in the fact that we've all been able to maintain great relationships. I think that Zach has done an exceptional job as CEO of leading from the front. I think that Henry has done an amazing job in leading the technical side of the business, as well as accepting, being like, it doesn't make sense for me as CTO to try to go represent the company. We don't need multiple representatives. Like, I'm just going to continue to engineer the best calorie tracker on the market. With Jake, similarly. Jake's the head of growth, and yet at the same time recognizes he's like, someone needs to be the one leading the influencer campaigns.
And they're crushing it.
Someone needs to lead the growth team internally, and you know, he doesn't need the spotlight, because the two of them also know that as soon as they exit the company, or as soon as we exit, whatever, as soon as daily operations are no longer required, which who knows when that is, that they'll be able to rep that badge, and that they'll have the full support of Zach and I. And, you know, just touching on it one more time, I mean, my structure within the company is essentially like, it went from being like active coach to now I'm kind of like, hey, I'm here, I'm a resource. Anytime we need additional capital just for, you know, cash flows, the way the Apple payouts work, when it comes to high level strategy, when it comes to, you know, what the next big steps are, I'm always there to help. In terms of the daily operations though, like, the team is incredible, and they don't need me every day.
And one thing we talked about earlier before the podcast was how there's a lot of, we'll call it alpha, in playing the underdog, even once you are no longer the underdog. And so you talked about how you made it a point to share that, like, you're not making every single app you make work, and you have failures, and they are very public. In the last year, obviously you had an insane level of success with Cali and with UMax. But you also had, two other projects, basically like crash and burn.
Yep.
What do you think the differences are in the ones that worked really well with the ones that both kind of withered out? From a relationships perspective purely.
This is a great question. From a relationship perspective, with Apex, you know, there are some butting heads, but like nothing that was not solvable. I think that it was just like flawed macro thesis in terms of what we want to work on. It wasn't the right project. And that's okay. You know, I've gotten a lot of flack for moving on from projects pretty quickly. I understand why people would hate on that. Now, that said, what I view it as is closing the feedback loop. I'm not going to allow my feedback loops to lengthen and lengthen and lengthen and lengthen when I know that what the end answer is going to be. Mm-hmm. If I recognize that the answer of that feedback loop is going to be no, failure, like X, do not continue, 0, I'm going to kill it and move on as soon as possible. In terms of 10X with the original product, similar. Like,
that's hardly a failure though, because you're still working on it.
I'm still working on it, certainly. Though the original application, the original UX was a failure. I mean, it objectively was.
And do you think that comes down to a lack of research or a co-founder mismatch?
I think that it was a lot of things. I think that, as these things often go, it was a complex system in which these pieces just circled into one another, and by virtue of being locked in an apartment for 36 days and on live stream 24/7, I wasn't able to think clearly at all. I think that Patty and I weren't the right match. I don't think that that's a fault of his or mine. I think that there were certainly, you know, things that I had done in that relationship that I'm not necessarily proud of. And now at the same time, I don't think that we were a good fit, period. Mm-hmm. I think that the design of the product, the user experience was flawed. I think that these things all fed into one another. I'm certainly not giving up. I'm so passionate about AI education as a whole. I'm so passionate.
We've talked about this since the Money Max, like when we tried to build an app in 2 weeks before last summer.
Dude, and so to answer your question, I think additionally of like why these two projects, most recent projects have relatively failed, it's like I'm trying to do bigger things that I think are more helpful and impactful for society as a whole. I don't think that is accomplished in a one-function application. I think that while Cali, for example, is very impactful, I want to build things that are even bigger and just have like much wider and deeper impact on individuals. And so, to act as if this is going to be done overnight and in the same way that my previous projects were built, I think would be a fool's errand. And I think that at times I certainly got too confident and too cocky about the fact that I would be able to just copy and paste these formulas.
Game is a game.
Yeah, for years I failed at building a business that could make me full-time income. And then it happened all at once, and I was able to do it back to back to back. Now I think I'm in a stage where I'm not just trying to make a full-time income. I'm trying to build a legacy. I'm trying to impact the world. And if it takes me years of failure after failure after failure, I simply will not give up. It is not in my nature. I will continue to do everything in my power to become more skilled, to work harder, and become the person that is able to build those sort of products and experiences. And I think that this is actually brings me to the point of social media for me. I've deactivated Twitter recently. I deleted Instagram off my phone, TikTok off my phone, every single social media. This has been a plan of mine for months. And the primary reason for this isn't the failures that I've experienced. I'm open, I'm public about that. I'm cool with, I don't care about people's perception of me. Not in that, I don't feel it and that it doesn't impact me negatively at all, but that won't affect my action. The reason that I've deleted social media is because I think a lot about the skill to follower ratio, right? Do your number of followers significantly outpace your relative skill and what you've accomplished? In line with what I preach about learning and mastering AI technology and foundational knowledge as a whole, that's what I prioritize in my own life. I spend a ton of time studying now, a ton of time using new AI tools.
Dude, I see the textbooks scattered all over the house.
I have textbooks literally
everywhere.
Scattered everywhere.
Like his bedroom, the dining room, the kitchen, all the desks,
I
the
have
couch.
notepads everywhere.
Dude, there's
just
a calculus
scribbled.
textbook in the back of the
You got
Jeep
Sam
right now.
behind the camera nodding. He's like, yep.
Too many textbooks, man.
Give me a notepad as a gift.
Dude, he gave you a notepad?
Yeah,
When he showed me the room,
it every day, bro.
when he showed me the room, he's like, I got you a little notepad. It's next to the bed. I just burst out laughing.
So, yeah, I mean, in line with this pursuit of trying to build massive companies, I recognize that I could just try to become a full-time businessman that just finds the right people and plugs them in and whatever. I don't think that that's the right way to go about it. I think especially in this world of increasingly powerful AI tools, the real bottleneck is not on capital or being able to hire, because most of the best talent is unhireable. The bottleneck for the builders will be how skilled you are. And I'm doing everything in my power to become as skilled as I possibly can.
Yeah.
And this means coding every single day. It means reading textbooks on new agentic systems, on complex systems. I recently started doing Math Academy again.
Oh my God.
Restudying multivariable calculus. So, yeah.
I'm trying to fill up our video because I always end the podcast off with the question of, if we do this podcast again in a year, what would you have want to accomplish? And this is the first podcast where I've gone back just under a year later and done it. So we got to find the answer.
I love it.
If you had to sum up actually everything that you learned in the last year to a few core learnings, what would the biggest ones be? Whether it's social or a growth tactic or just the way you live your life now?
So I think this is an interesting question because what I have learned is not necessarily applicable to others, right? I think that, and throughout this podcast, I'm sure that there are things that I've said that may seem like they're universally applicable, when in reality they're probably just applicable to me. I would say that the number one thing that I've learned, a friend/mentor was telling me about how Peter Thiel does not give advice, right? He rarely gives advice on what you should do. Sorry, Mike.
I think that the lesson here is that I don't think he doesn't give advice because he's not intelligent and because he hasn't learned a lot himself, obviously, but because advice is rarely applicable to the masses. Things that I've learned that have worked for me will not necessarily work for other people. And now you take this on the flip side, things that people tell you to do and things that people say will work for you will not necessarily work. When I was graduating from school working on RizGPT, everyone was like, dude, what the fuck? If you're gonna pursue entrepreneurship, build something big, build something cool. I rejected that, and thankfully it ended up being a good decision. And I think that people in society, friends, family will tell us things that we should do because they want the best for us. They truly do. But it doesn't mean that they're right. And it doesn't mean that what worked for somebody else is gonna work for you.
I feel like, if anything, at least we know we're not just making stuff up as we go.
What do you mean?
Quite literally everything you just said, and like you're learning from the past year as it relates to don't take all the advice that you get. You know, what applies to me doesn't apply to everyone else. It's the same thing we talked about today in a different form, manifested in a different way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
like if you had to do it again though, right? Like now today, if you look back at like your biggest learning or your biggest piece of advice from the last year, what does it become today?
It's so interesting that in that clip, I said, people are like, if you're going to pursue entrepreneurship, don't just build an app called RizGPT, you know, build something big, whatever. And I think that over the course of the past year, the majority of the advice that I've received is to continue to do the things that have worked. And so it's been continue to build the RizGPT UMax style apps and continue to run it up. And I have received an unbelievable amount of hate of people saying like, what's this, like Apex self-improvement content thing, and like 10x doesn't make sense, and blah, 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 blah. And I think that the biggest learning that I have had over the course of the past year is probably a reaffirmation of what I spoke about in that clip, which is that, man, you really need to just follow your gut. I think that there is an unbelievable amount of noise in the world, and like even everything that you've heard me say in this podcast, if you hear me say something and you're like, that doesn't sit right, I don't know that I agree with that, but at the same time, he's speaking so confidently and he seems to have achieved some level of success. Reject what I say. Reject it. Reject what other people say. Learn foundational knowledge, build your skills, and follow your gut. At the very least, if you follow your gut and it doesn't work out, you'll have known that you did it your way and that you learned the lesson that you had to. Whereas if you do not follow your gut and it doesn't work out, man, you wasted your time. You wasted your time. You didn't even follow your path. And so with Apex and 10x up to this point, it's like I followed my gut on them and it didn't work out. But I think that I've learned the lessons that I need to. And when we check back in 1 year, I'm excited to kind of see how this strategy will have played out.
Hell yeah, brother. It's a great ending.
Battery just